Hello everyone, Nadim here with PCSN. So I get asked the question, why should we replace hardware on a cadence? So why not just wait for the hardware to fail before replacing it? So for example, you might have a couple of servers or a bunch of desktops. Why replace them proactively? Why not just wait for the hardware to fail? And when the user comes complaining to us, hey, they can't log in or their machine doesn't turn on, then we can replace it. And we can have a few systems on hand to replace those machines. So a couple of things here. It's always a lower cost to replace something proactively while it's running. The user settings, the data, it's just easier to migrate when the machine is still accessible. When hardware dies and the machine is not accessible, it's a much higher cost. Not only the initial cost of just the replacement, but also the downtime for the user. And this is much more apparent when you're talking about a server, because when a server goes down, that impacts multiple users. For a small company, typically it impacts all users, right? So that's why most enterprises and most better run IT infrastructure operations have a cadence that they go by, that they replace hardware. And this is part of what we do with our VCIO role. One of the things that we go over is set up the cadence of replacing hardware. Since we have insight into the infrastructure, we can kind of set up a schedule. These machines are going to be replaced this quarter. These additional machines are going to be replaced that quarter, whatever have you. Now, if you don't replace these machines on a cadence, let's say let's say a cadence for a company with about 100 users would be to replace machines every, and I'm just throwing out some averages, every 3 years. Now, what happens when somebody does not replace a machine every 3 years? Technology gets outdated really fast. So after the third year, the users, processors, applications, things like that are running much slower than other machines in the organization that are fairly newer, less than 3 years old. And let's say if you run that machine for 5 years and then it fails and then you replace it. So not only are you incurring the cost of replacing that machine after the user's machine died, so now you have to start from scratch. Basically, you lost the settings and some of the data that was on that local machine. And it takes time for users to make their machine to be just as it was before it died. And then on top of that, now you have to spend some time getting the user used to newer operating system as well, because between that time frame, the OS would have changed a few iterations, a few generations. So it's almost like somebody was working on Windows 7, and I'm just giving out examples, right? So somebody was working on Windows 7 and they've been using it for years and years, and then it dies, and now you cannot get Windows 7. Now you have to get Windows 10. You just can't get Windows 7. So now this user whose machine just all of a sudden died got a new machine. The settings are the default settings because nobody knows what the user wants, what their settings were, because the machine died. And now the user gets a new machine with a new OS, and they have to now learn Windows 10 because things are always in a few different places, right? Things always change. So there's a cost to that. And then there is the downtime that was involved because the machine went down. And when you add all these different things up, the cost of the machine that you replace would have been lower if you had replaced it on that 3 year cadence as opposed to that 5 year cadence that you, or the 5 year replacement that you were forced to do. And it could be more. I mean, it could be, 6 years, 7 years. Typically, it doesn't get beyond like the 6 to 7 year time frame. Um, if it does, it's probably, very small companies, maybe 2, 3 users. Just they buy machines off of Best Buy or something and just use it until it dies. Uh, so that's what the situation is now. On the other side of the equation, uh, it's not a, and this is from a costing perspective. It's not a higher cost. The delta of the cost is not very high if a company is using uh, remote servers like cloud servers, because the user settings, the user's local data, everything is left on the cloud server. The only thing the user has locally on their machine is just the ability to connect to the cloud server. So now if the machine dies, we don't care, right? We simply uh, get them a new machine, connect them to the cloud server, all their settings, data, whatever have you, is as it is. So that's why a lot of companies they don't only replace their hardware on a cadence, but also they are figuring out that moving to the cloud and having that, all the settings, data, everything in one place is a lower cost from many reasons. One reason is just that the replacement cycle, but another reason that I run into with companies a lot of times is they have remote users. They don't want data to be sitting on somebody's personal machine just because some user is using their own personal machine. They want all the company intellectual property to be on company owned equipment. And it's very easy to do that with a cloud server. So I hope that makes sense. Whether whether you do it on a cadence or not, or if you wait for machines to break down, if you calculate your costs overall, including the downtime and the user frustration, the longer cycle it takes to replace a machine that is already dead, because you can replace the machine fairly quickly, but then 5 days later the user is complaining they can't find something, or something is not right, they need it changed because things are in different places, right? um, Hope that makes sense. Always try to schedule out your replacement cycle, and we try to do that for about 1.5 years in the future, so we have not only the replacement cycle, but now we can budget for it, right? So that's another advantage that you have when you do things on a cadence and pre-plan things, is that now you have some much more accurate numbers around budgeting. So hope that makes sense. Until next time, everybody, have a great day.